Yeah. Good morning, students. Today we are continuing with the Module 4 portion with respect to the chapter Intrusion Detection and Prevention System. Okay. So in that we are studying the topic about IP traceback. So IP traceback. What is the use of IP tracebacking procedure? Okay. So there are two principal approaches in IP traceback. The first method is packet marking. The second method is packet logging. So by the name itself, we can understand what is marking and what you mean by logging, right? So that we are going to see how the marking will be done and what's the usage of the logging procedure. So in the packet marking, the packet keeps track of the routers which it has visited. In the packet logging, each router keeps track of the packets passing through it. Okay, so again we can also have the hybrid approaches using a combination of the packet marking and a packet logging. Okay, which is also been proposed. Again, these procedures are very simple. So let us see one by one. The probabilistic packet marking. Okay, probabilistic means depending on some probabilistic value how the attacker, okay, will be far from the victim, and based on that the number of packets how it will be calculated. Okay, that concepts we are going to study here. So here if we have the intermediate router where it it is going to append its 32-bit IP addresses to each of the packet which it forwards. Okay, here we are going to consider the ever intermediate router were to append its 32-bit IP addresses to each packet it forwards. So the question here is how much bytes it is going to consume. So a packet on the internet traverses about 10 hops on an average. Right? So an extra 40 bytes would be needed to keep track of its path from source to destination. So this is an unacceptable per packet overage. Instead of this, the existing but infrequently used fields in the IP header are used to keep track of the routers visited. Okay, the routers visited by the packet. This information can be stored, okay, in the some infrequently used fields of the IP header. So obviously the IP header has a 16-bit ID field. This field provides the support for the packet fragmentation and reassembly. So depending on the networks, different restrictions on the size of the datagrams, okay, are allowed to carry. They may split a datagram into 2 or more fragments and send each fragment separately. So the router at the destination end has the responsibility for reassembling the fragments. Okay, the different fragments will be reassembled by the router at the destination once it is receiving those fragments to create the original packet. So all the fragments carry the same number in their ID field. So they can be identified for reassembly. Because the fragments have to be identified to which particular source Okay, these fragments are belonging to. So it will carry the same number in their ID field, which helps in reassembly at the destination. The rotor present at the destination. So, on the assumption that the ID field is often unused, the traceback schemes employing a probabilistic packet marking uses the ID field to store partial information on intermediate routers. Okay, but given that again the length of the each IP address is 4 bytes, how can a packet store router address information in a 16-bit ID field? Okay, so how it is possible? So the answer is by computing a global fingerprint for each router. Let us say it is of 16 or fewer bits of the hash of a router's IP address. Okay, the global fingerprint will be calculated, which is nothing but the hash of a router's IP address, which may be about 16 or fewer bits. Okay, so therefore an intermediate router writes its fingerprint value into the ID field of a packet with the probability P. Okay, so that again here it could overwrite a previously written fingerprint of a router closer to the source of the attack. This is the point to remember here, because a packet will be moving through so many routers. Okay, so whether all the routers are going to overwrite the packets with the fingerprint, or only the few routers are going to overwrite the packet. So the answer is here, it is going to overwrite, a router is going to overwrite the previously written fingerprint of a router which is closer to the source of the attack. That is the one possibility here. Okay, so again now to identify the perpetrator of the attack, the ingress router at the victim end will need to collect a sufficient number of packets that are all part of the same flooding attack. It has to keep track of all these packets that are part of the same flooding attack. So, here one more assumption is each ingress router will be having a map of all upstream routers from it. So, which helps to identify the path of a packet also with the usage of the map of all upstream routers. Okay, so now here we are seeing a diagram with respect to the map of upstream routers, and also in the figure B the router fingerprint in ID field of the IP header. Okay, so here the notation or the symbol S stands for the source of the attack and V stands for the victim. So in between source and the victim we have various other intermediate routers. F, E, D, C, B, M, H, G, I, L, K, J, all these are the routers. Okay, between S and V. So here, since all the packets have been probabilistically marked with the fingerprint of the intermediate routers, okay, an ensemble of the attack packets will reveal the identities of various intermediate rotors, which helps in reconstructing the attack path. Okay, that is the usage of this probabilistic packet marking here. Okay, all the packets will be probabilistically marked with the fingerprint of the intermediate rotors. Therefore, an assemble of the attack packets will reveal the identities of the various intermediate rotors, helping in reconstruction of the attack path. Okay, so in the figure B here, we are seeing the packet, okay, packet 1 and the packet 2. So where we are seeing here, the first packet 1 was first marked by the rotor D and not overwritten by any downstream rotor. The downstream rotor of the rotor D are what? In the figure A we are seeing other downstream rotor of the D are C, B and A. But here it is not overwritten by all these rotors. Whereas in the packet 2 we are seeing this in the ID field of the packet 2, the first it was marked by the rotor E and then its ID field was again overwritten by the rotor C. Okay, so what's the difference between packet 1 and packet 2? Why was not the packet D was not overwritten by other downstream rotor? Why the packet 2 was overwritten by the downstream rotor C? Because one of the reason here is the rotor E is very close to the source of the attack. Okay, and the rotor D is little far from the source of the attack. So, since this packet 2 was written by the rotor E, which is very close to the source of the attack, okay, now the rotor C, the downstream rotor of the E are DCBA. So, one of the rotor C has overwritten. So, which helps. Okay, so once this packet 2 arrives at the packet, at the victim, it helps him to construct the path of the attack using this, since it is overwritten by the rotor C. So the victim will analyze that this packet 2 is okay from the attacker, right? So that is the advantage of overwriting the IP field with the fingerprint of the rotor information, okay, to construct the path of the attack. So that is the point here to remember here, right? That is basically in this probabilistic packet marking. Okay, in here we have the point here already which I have told. That is, note that it could overwrite a previously written fingerprint of a rotor which is closer to the source of the attack. So here rotor E was very close to the source of the attack. So it was overwritten by the downstream rotor C. Okay, so now the one of the problem with this approach is that it is more probable that upstream rotors have their marks overwritten. Okay, because we saw, right, for example, the rotor E has marked initially, then it was overwritten by the rotor C, right? So here like this. Therefore, if I consider the probability that the mark made by the rotor F on a packet to the V survives is 1 minus P to the power 5. So here in the diagram, if I consider the victim is here and the router F is here. So at what distance the router F is present? The router F is present here after A, B, C, D, E and F. That is at the 6th position. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. F is at the 6th position from the victim. Okay. So its probability is 1 minus p to the power h minus 1. The number of hops from the victim to F is 6. So 6 minus 1. That is 1 minus p to the power 5. Therefore, the probability that a packet arriving at V is marked by the router F and that mark survives is p into 1 minus p to the power 5. That means if you want to generalize this, the probability of an incoming packet at the victim V having the mark of a router H hops away is p into 1 minus p to the power h minus 1. Okay. So here an important consideration is the number of packets needed at the victim V to reconstruct the attack path. Okay. So how many packets are needed by the victim to reconstruct the attack path? Using a single packet, obviously you cannot make a strong decision if we come to know about the source of the attack. So you need some number of packets which is needed by the victim to reconstruct the path. So this is closely related to the probability P and the distance between the victim V and the attack source. So to construct the attack path, the equation is used P into 1 minus P to the power h minus 1. Okay. So this is about the probabilistic packet marking. So now let us move on to the one more method, that is the packet logging. Okay. So here in the packet marking, what we were doing in the packet marking, the IP header field was marked by the fingerprint of the router, right? So in the packet logging, each router attempts to keep track of every packet that passes through it. So the packet logging makes use of the idea of a packet fingerprint or digest. In the packet marking, in the probabilistic packet marking, the fingerprint of the router was used. In the packet logging, we are going to make use of a packet fingerprint or a digest. So this packet fingerprint, how to obtain the packet fingerprint or the digest? So this is computed using a well-designed hash function which distributes the hash values uniformly across all possible hash inputs. So the important feature of the packet logging is that it can help track even a single rough that is packet. Okay. So what it will assume is that initially each router stores each packet received by it in the last 5 minutes. In the last 5 minutes, which are all the packets have been received by the router, it will be storing all those packets. So now, suppose the victim wishes to obtain the exact path followed by a packet received by it. Okay. Victim wants the path from where this packet has arrived at the victim. Okay, so here the idea is that the victim's ingress router queries each of its adjacent routers whether they have seen the packet. Okay, so that means here again in the diagram we have in the as we saw in the previous diagram with respect to this, here the ingress router at V is what? A. Okay, A is the ingress router at the victim V. So it the victim ingress router A queries each of its adjacent routers whether they have seen the packet. So now the adjacent routers to A are B, H and G. Okay. So now let us assume the router B is going to respond to A back. That is, I have seen the packet. This message will be conveyed to the router A. Since A is requesting its neighbors about the packet. Right? So, then that is, again since B is replying, now B also queries its neighbor routers. The neighbor routers of B are C and M. So let us assume C is going to reply back to C. Similarly, C also requests its neighbors routers D. Let us assume D. And D will be asking E, E will be asking F like that. Okay, the chain will continue with the interaction between the router and its neighbors. So like this, the victim is able to find the route of the path of the packet. Okay, so the one that responds positively then construct its neighbors and so on until the source of the packet is traced. So once the source of the packet is traced, if the packet is coming from the source of the attack, yes, as seen in the figure here, those type of the packets will be discarded, telling these are all the attacker packets. Okay, so now what are the storage requirements with respect to this algorithm? Okay, the storage requirements at each router implementing this scheme could be prohibitive because let us consider the router with 6 links. A single router can be connected with other 6 neighbors. So assume that the link speed are 1 GB per second. Okay, and that router is operating at a peak capacity. So here what happens? First, it will assume that a copy of each packet traversing the router is to be maintained for a period of 5 minutes. So the required amount of the storage required in a router is about 1 terabyte. Because it is each router is connected to various other neighbors. Okay, so it has to accept all the packets from its neighbors and it has to store information about all the packets which have arrived within the 5 minutes. So at the expense of some computation, we can bring down the storage requirements by storing only the digest or hash of a packet instead of its entire content. Okay, so how we can reduce this storage requirement at the router? So the solution is the storage requirement can be further reduced by the use of a space efficient data structure called the Bloom filter. Okay, we are going to adopt a data structure called as a Bloom filter. So here let n be the maximum number of packets to be stored in a router in a interval say 7 minutes. So it will keep the some capacity, the maximum number of packets. Then each time an element has to be inserted, one or more hash function on that element need to be computed. Okay, on each of the packet, the hash function have to be computed, right? So let k be the number of distinct and independent hash functions used. That is, we can have more than one hash functions which can be used on a packet. So let k is a designer parameter. Again, it depends on the designer issues. How many hash functions to be used? It depends on the designer constraint. So now the output of the each hash function returns a w-bit quantity. Okay, the output of the hash function is now about w-bit quantity. So the Bloom filter is basically a bit array, and the size of this Bloom filter is about 2 to the power w. That is represented as m. M is equal to 2 to the power w with the size of the array. What is this w? W is the output of the hash function which is in w-bit quantity. Okay, and why we are using hash function? Because we are using a packet fingerprint. Packet fingerprint or the digest is obtained by using a hash function. Okay, so now the hash function, output of hash function will be of w-bit quantity, and since we are using the Bloom filter in the form of the array, the size of this Bloom filter is of 2 to the power w. Okay, now let us see in this array how the packet insertion will be done. So when a packet enters the router, the k hashes are computed on its content, on the packet content. So to speed up the computation, the hashes are computed on the invariant parts of the IP header, and a small part of the payload which is of 10 bytes. That is, the hashes are only computed on the invariant parts of the IP header which is of about 10 bytes. So now let us assume the k hash computations yields the values I1, I2, I3, etc. up to Ik. What is this I1, I2, I3, etc.? The values, okay? K stands for what? The number of hash functions used. Let us assume I am going to make use of 3 hash function. So I will be having 3 outputs with respect to each of the hash functions I1, I2, I3. So if I have k number of hash functions, I will be having k number of outputs from each of the hash functions. So those values are represented as I1, I2, I3, Ik, etc. etc. up to Ik. So these k hash outputs are used as indices into the bit array. So if I want to store into the Bloom's filter, which is an array, I want the index. That index I am going to get through the output of the hash function, which is computed on the 10 bytes of the IP header contents. So now to insert a packet, the bits in those positions are all set to 1. That is, if one or more of them were already set, they remain same. So we are going to discuss one diagram with respect to this. So now, how to perform the packet presence check? To check if a packet P is present in the Bloom's filter, again we are going to compute the k hashes on it as we did during the packet insertion. So suppose the k hash computation again now also leads to the values I1, I2, I3, etc. up to Ik. Then we are going to check whether each of the elements of the Bloom's filter are set. Okay. So if even one of these elements equal to 0, P has not been encountered by this router. Okay. That is in the Bloom's filter corresponding to the values, indices values I1, I2, I3, etc. up to Ik, which is performed on the packet. If the value at the particular index is not equal to 1, that is if it is 0, the value at the indices I1, I2, I3, etc. up to Ik, if any one of those elements equal to 0, then it means that that particular packet has not been encountered by the router. Okay. So now let us derive an expression for the probability of a false positive. So now before to that, let us see this diagram here, what's happening. So here we have, for example, the various packets P7, P309, etc. So many packets we have which is arriving at the router. Okay. So here we are seeing packet number P7, where on the packet P7, the where 3 hash function H1, H2, H3 are applied. Okay. So and its values, H1 is going to give the some indices value I1, let us assume here. So it is storing 1 here. Similarly, with respect to H2, it is stored 1. With respect to H3 also, it is stored 1 here. Now, with respect to the packet number 309, H1, H2, H3 is applied, and the output of each of the hash function, okay, gives the indices into the array. So, at that particular indexes, the value 1 is inserted. Similarly, with respect to the other packet 1054, hash function is applied. Output of the hash function gives us the indexes into the Bloom's filter array. At that particular indexes, the value 1 is inserted. Okay. So, now, and again to check here, this function H1, H2, H3 is computed here to check for the packet presence. Okay. So, now let us assume we are performing the packet presence check with respect to the packet number P7. Okay. So, for the P7, here we have applied initially H1, H2, H3 while storing to the Bloom's taxonomy also. So, to check whether the particular packet information is present in the array, again we are performing the hash function H1, H2, H3, which is going to give again the same, that is, it is going to give some indices into the array. At that particular indices, it is going to check whether the value 1 is present or not. So, H1 is giving 1, H2 is giving 1, H3 is also giving 1. Okay. So, now to derive the equation for the false positive, let us see what is the false positive here. Okay. So, for a given n, the chance of false positive decreases with larger m. On the other hand, a larger value of m incurs a greater storage overhead again. So, let us derive an expression for the probability of a false positive as a function of m and k. Probability, the first probability is about a packet hashes to the index I1, which is equal to 1 by m. Then the second probability is a packet that does not hash to the index I1 is remaining 1 minus 1 by m. Now the probability about none of the n packets hashes to the I1 with any of the k hash functions, because we are making use of many hash functions which is about k. So with respect to each of the hash function, if none of the packets are hashing into the index I1, It is about 1 minus 1 by m to the power kn. Then at least one of the n packets hashes to I1 with at least one of the k hash functions. Okay. Here I1 stands for what? The indexes, the output of the hash function to get the value from the Bloom's filter. Okay. So we are speaking now here with respect to the number of packets. Okay. Whether none of the n packets hash to the I1 with any of the k hash function, then at least one of the n packets access to the I1 with at least one of the k hash functions. So if this is 1 minus 1 by m to the power kn is none of the packets is accessing to I1, then at least one of the n packets access to the I1 will be 1 minus of 1 minus 1 by m to the power kn. So now the probability of a false positive is given as, that is, the probability at least one of the n packets adds to the I1 with at least one of the k hash functions and at least one of the n packets access to I2 with at least one of the k hash functions. Okay, two indices. And at least one of the n packets hash to the ik. Because see why we are finding I1, I2, I3, I4 etc. up to ik? Because on a single packet we are using more than one hash function. For each of the hash function we have the output I1, I2 etc. up to ik, which are the indices into the array. So we need to find all the indices with respect to each of the hash function with respect to a packet. So at least one of the n packets hashes to the ik with at least one of the k hash function is 1 minus of 1 by m to the power k n whole to the power k. Okay. This is the equation. That means it turns out that a reasonably acceptable false positive probability of 1% is achievable with k is equal to 3. That means if we are using a 3 hash functions and m will be 12 into n. That is, this translates to a storage cost of only 12 bits per packet at the expense of performing 3 hash computation per packet. That is, it is considerably less than the storing each IP datagram, which is of about 500 bytes on an average, or even storing just a 32-bit hash of a packet. Okay, so this is about packet logging scheme. That is here in the figure, in this figure. Okay, it clarifies how a false positive may occur. Okay, that is initially what we did, we first computed the hash function to get the indices to store the values into the Bloom filter. Similarly, to check whether that packet is present in a Bloom filter, again we computed the hash functions on the same packet, for example P7, okay, to check whether that particular packet information is present in the Bloom filter or not. So here the router has been presented with the packet P7 and is being asked whether it has encountered this packet. So what the router will do? When the router is asked to check whether the packet P7 has encountered by it, the router will compute the H1 on P7, H2 on P7 and H3 on P7 as we are seeing here in this diagram, right, for the presence check, packet presence check. And it looks to see if the corresponding bits in the Bloom filter are set. So the output of the H1 gives us index into the Bloom filter as we are seeing here through the line joining to the array. It's the index. At that index we will check whether the value 1 is present or not. If the value 1 is present means, okay, the packet P7 is information is stored. That means the router has come across P7. So these bits again as we are seeing here in the diagram, these bits have been set respectively Okay. With respect to the packet number 309 also, 1054 also. Right. So, H1 on, see here, the diagram you are seeing here, the H1 function applied on the packet number 309, okay, is giving to the sum index where we are marking it as 1. So now the same index I am getting here by applying the as function H2 on the packet number P7. Yes or no? As we are seeing it from the diagram. Okay. So H1 on packet 309 and H2 on the packet number P7 are pointing to the same index here now at the checking time, packet presence checking time by the router. So the system will conclude rightly or wrongly that it has encountered P7 before. This is nothing but the false positive. Because here, as we are seeing here, while inserting into the array about the P7, again H1, H2, H3 have computed, that is leading to some other indexes as we are seeing here through the lines. Then we have stored the value 1 there. But at the presence of, packet presence checking, for the same packet P7, it is giving some other index. Okay, compared to the H2 of this P7 and compared to the H2 of on the P7 here. Okay, the output of the H2 applied on the P7 at the packet presence check by the router is leading to this index, which is same as the index what we have got by applying the hash function H1 on the packet P309. So how it will decide the router whether I have come across the packet P7 or not? Right? So this is nothing but a false positive. That means positive means here the packet P7 depending on the marking 1 here inside the array, it tells that it has come across the packet P7. But the output of the as functions are giving into the some other indexes, which is a false positive. False positive. Okay, that is nothing but false positive. So these are the equations with respect to the probability of a false positive. Okay, so today in class we have discussed about the IP trace back method with respect to the packet marking and the packet logging method. Okay, so here if you have any doubts, hello. Hello students. If you have any doubts, please you can ask with respect to the previous topic also.